What's up and welcome back to my channel. It's JVceo. If you're tuning in for the first time, make sure you like, comment and subscribe. Subscribe. Same thing. What's that thingy again that the Americans say? Tomato. There you go. Anyways, check this out. So I think I've had a couple of people ask me this on Snapchat, but equally I think this channel is for addressing conversations like this, essentially speaking, just to make sure that the right questions are being answered. Because I think, there's quite a lot of conflicting information out there. And by no means am I an expert. This is just my own, educated opinion as well. What is the better option? Should I rent or should I buy? And these are real life questions, because if you think about it, a lot of us are getting older, right? A lot of you guys watching this video probably second half of your 20s, and now these conversations are starting to sort of make sense, because you're thinking, there's that societal pressure to buy a house, but equally, you're thinking, should I just move out from my parents' house and rent in the meantime? So I'll address it in this video. For the purpose of this video, I'm not going to talk about, properties like northeast of England, like, the Durhams and so on and so forth. So much as I got properties in that area, it's not relevant in this video, because the truth is it will be cheaper to actually do a mortgage than rent one of those properties. But at the same time, those kind of properties in the not so affluent areas are not the places that people want to live in anyway. So I'll stick to, let's talk maybe London or other major cities. For the purpose of this video, I would let's start by doing an analysis, right? And if you're waiting for me to give an answer, or rent or buy, I wouldn't. I think I'll sort of run the two different arguments, and maybe at the end I might sway to the left or to the right, right? But that's what I'm going to do. But let's start by doing an analysis on Enfield. Enfield is a place that I'm quite familiar with. So I'll jump on the laptop now and we'll see what the properties in Enfield are currently sitting at. So we go into Rightmove, and we open two screens on Rightmove. Or you know what, we just do one screen after another. I'll take you through this as well. So we've got Enfield, and let's say rent in a 3-bed property in Enfield, a house, not a flat. Just use that as the test case in this particular scenario. So let's say that, and let's filter it by the lowest price first. So generally speaking, ignore, let's see if we can filter out the house shares and student accommodations and all that sort of stuff. It's not coming up. Take that out. Oh, no, that's the must-haves. How do we exclude? Don't show house shares, student accommodation, retirement homes. Done. Right, so now you're looking, and, you're looking at around sort of 1,500. That was the number I was thinking about. Sort of 1,500, 1,600 is the general consensus in Enfield. The general consensus. Now, let's have a look at what this same property would cost if we were to actually get a mortgage on it, because then that would give us a better understanding. This is going to be a very, very interesting video, because I have quite a lot of points that I'd love to cover. Very, very interesting video. So let's just say, again, 3 bedrooms, let's say a house, and let's search that. And let's say filter by the lowest, and let's see what comes up. Exactly what I thought. You're looking at around 400 grand in Enfield. So for argument's sake, let's just choose that property, right? So let's say 400 grand. Rightmove does a brilliant job of showing you how much it will cost you at the bottom. So potentially, putting down a sort of 10% deposit, 39,950, 25-year mortgage, fixed at 2.4%. which isn't a bad rate, but I think that would creep up over the next couple of years. You're looking at around 1,595. So on the face value, it seems to be quite similar. I guess, you could say maybe even buying a house is £5 cheaper. But that's on the face value. But what we're going to do in this video now is dig into loads of different factors that could affect what particular decision you make. So firstly, let's start with talking about the biggest thing, which is the barrier to entry. I mean, even if it were the same, 1,600, 1,600, in terms of barrier to entry, if you were to rent a property, Two barriers to entry, you need credit for both of them, right? So shameless plug, if you're struggling with your credit, follow the link below. Moving on from that, and some of you may not know, you actually need credit to rent a property now. But moving on from that, again, another barrier to entry that both of these share is you need a salary requirement. So now when you go to rent a property, they want you to earn a certain amount. But the biggest barrier to entry that buying shares, that renting doesn't have, is that huge deposit that you have to put down. So now if you're looking at putting down, let's say 39,000, that pays for around, sort of like 26 to 28 months worth of rent, that actual deposit, and that deposit is, essentially speaking, money you don't get back. Of course, it goes into your equity, but you don't get that back in a form of cash, let's say after 2 years or whatever the case is. Whereas in renting, you put down, like a month and a half deposit of whatever the rental figure is. So in this case, if it's 1,500, you're putting down around 2,250, and after your tenancy ends, you get that money back. So that, for me, it's one of the big reasons. And let's be clear, we've just come out of a pandemic. Things are very difficult. There's not a lot of people that have 39,000 just sitting there saying, I'm ready for a mortgage. And, and that's just on a 400 grand house. In different areas, I'm sure that, that those numbers are slightly different, maybe 450 and so on and so forth. And again, let's even be clearer, getting a property on a 10% deposit, you can still do that, but it's not as prevalent as it once was, let's say 6-7 years ago. And a lot of times you're probably looking to put upwards of 15% now. So it's quite a huge barrier to entry for most people, and it's very unaffordable for most people. So that's probably one of the reasons why I would be swaying to renting. Reasons why this actually came into my head, this whole conversation, other than the questions that were asked of me, was, I think a little while back, I used to live in Hertfordshire. I'm not going to give you guys the exact area because I still have another property there, but I used to live in Hertfordshire, right? And I had a property, a detached property that I was renting, and I was paying back then. This was probably 2017 to 2000, maybe 19 or thereabout, or 15 to 2018, sorry. And I was paying around £1,200 for the property. But I knew that the landlord or the landlady had a deficit, because I believe her mortgage was around 1,400 a month, or 1,500 a month or thereabout. And I thought, wow, okay, that's quite interesting. So actually, she's not making, the mortgage repayment via renting a property. So in that case, it's cheaper to rent that house than actually buy that house. So that's what sparked the research of me, starting to look into these various things. And I mean, it's years later now that I've chosen to address it on my YouTube channel. Now, moving on from that, a lot of you are probably thinking, all right, cool, answer the question, what should I do? Should I buy a property or should I rent a property? We've got to talk about your personal circumstances. I'll give you an example. If you have a family on the way, imagine now your wife's pregnant, you don't have your affairs in order, and you can't go off and just go buy a property, then maybe, the right move is to rent a property, if that makes any sense. That's number one. Number two, as we've already spoken about before, I mean, obviously, as much as they both share the credit element, you need a much better credit to get the right property at the right interest compared to, renting a property. So that is another personal circumstance that you would have to contend with yourself. Some people are actually cash rich, but they're not really salary rich. So in that case, you don't have much of an option but to actually rent a property. So you can obviously rent as much as I earlier on said that agents are starting to ask for sort of salary requirements with renting a property. You can still get properties rented without that actual sort of clause. So yeah, in that case, if you're more cash rich, but you're not really salary rich, then you find that you're in a position where you can't actually purchase a property. So you would have to go down the renting route or route. Now, moving on from there, one of the reasons why owning a property is so not attractive, and we've got to actually talk about this, because I think there is a misconception, oh, I'm a property owner. Me personally, I'm not too fussed about actually owning a property that I live in. If anything, actually, I'm more interested in renting a property that I live in, not for the cliche stuff of, the property you own is a liability and so on and so forth. But the thing is, I'll give you an example. Goes back to what the point I've just made, right? But I could afford to rent £1 million property, but I can't afford to actually buy it because I don't have the salary to purchase that. My tax returns doesn't reflect that, if that makes any sense. However, £1 million property would cost me probably 4 grand, 4.5 grand, maybe 5 grand a month out in the country, big mansion to rent. I could afford to rent that. So I've then said to myself, when I'm actually ready to fully settle down, I'm not traveling and in and out of the country, I probably would rent. Like, I have my properties up north, my, let's say, blocks of flats and all of these things, and I'll, pay myself a salary and use that to rent the property that I would actually want to live in. So that's my personal sort of opinion on the matter. However, we can go a little further. So now, when it comes to buying a property, a lot of people don't realize that away from the clout that comes with buying a property, there's a lot of responsibility, financial responsibility. I'm saying, from your insurance to repairs in a house to maintenance to let's say if you're in a flat, I think it's your ground rent. Like, there's so much that comes, pest control. Like, there's so much. Your fence has fallen down, like your roof needs replacement, which can be very expensive. Oh, you've got asbestos in your roof or in your walls or something. There's a huge amount of responsibility, financial responsibility, that comes with renting a property. However, you don't have these same financial responsibilities when it comes to, sorry, that comes with buying a property, but you don't have these financial responsibilities when it comes to renting, because all you have to do, pay your rent. If there's anything wrong, you call up the agent. So, for example, I was in a friend's house the other day, and their sewage was blocked and coming up from the garden, and literally they just called the agent. The next day it came and got fixed. Whereas now, if it was your property, you're the one being called. That's if it's an investment property. If it's your home, you're the one dealing with all of that. It can be quite stressful, and if you want a stress-free life, someone deals with everything and everything's in place for you, then maybe renting is the right route to go down. Now, let's talk about certain things again in terms of unpredictability. So this covers both of them, but I'll let you guys make a decision. So unpredictability, number one, for buying a house is the change in interest rate can significantly raise your repayment sort of value significantly. But equally, you have that when it comes to renting. However, I don't know what's actually safer. I will say that renting can probably increase faster than the rates could. Actually, that's not. I'm not sure. But at least, I'm putting it out there. So maybe we could have a conversation in the comment section. So you got your interest rates increases. Let's say, the interest rate might increase by whatever it increases by. But equally, you've got your rented property, which sometimes after 2 years or so, the landlord or the landlady, owner of the property, would add another 10% to your repayments. If you're on 1,500 a month, that takes it up to 1,650, and that can be quite a jump. So that's something that you kind of have to contend on both ends. Now, moving on from that, there is a big benefit when it comes to buying, of course, the fact that you have equity. You have equity, you're paying off, and you're paying off towards something. Think about it as a saving. You're saving into your house, as you're paying off your mortgage on an annual basis. You're paying into your retirement fund, you're paying into your property fund, however you want to see it, but you're saving something that is tangible at the end of it. Whereas when you look at renting a property, it's money into thin air, except having a roof over your head. However, I'm going to flip that right on its head. You could also get into a position where you have a negative equity. For those of you that don't know what a negative equity is, in a nutshell, it's whereby the value of your property is worth less than, what it was, or what your actual loan from the bank is. So in this case, let's say you buy a 200 grand property, you put down 10%, that's 20 grand. So now you've taken a loan of 180 grand. Your property was worth £200,000 when you bought it. For whatever reason, let's say, the property market has dropped by 30%. So now you've lost 60 grand. Now your property is only worth 140,000. You know, so you owe the bank 180,000, but your property is worth 140,000. That's a negative equity. And a lot of this happened in the Northeast when the recession came in 2019. A lot of people had properties that were worth 80,000 and they ended up being worth 20,000 and so on and so forth. If you actually go on the land registry, a lot of these properties that you see in the Northeast selling for like 20, 30, 40,000 were once worth 100,000 plus. So that's one of the disadvantages of actually owning a property, because you have to then deal with these and contend with all of this. Considering COVID, the effects of it, we don't know what's around the corner. Who knows? We might be in a bubble, it might burst, and these are the things you have to contend with. However, there is another benefit. You know, if I again flip it back from its head back to the top, is the fact that you have the benefit of the appreciation on the property, whereas if you're renting, you actually don't have that. So after 10 years of paying your mortgage, your property might have gone up, you know, let's say 4% in value every single year. So now from 200,000, your property may now be worth, I don't know, maybe 280, 260, whatever the case is. But this is something you don't get on a rented property. You don't get to enjoy these benefits. One more thing that I wanted to touch on was debt management in terms of both renting and buying. I might do a part two to this video because there's a couple of things that I wanted to touch on, but I just haven't had the opportunity to do that because I wanted to make this video quite short, and I've got quite a busy day and there's a few things that I need to knock off my list. But when it comes to debt management, so what happens, because that's a good comparison. If you fall back on your house payment, I mean, you usually get evicted in, let's say, 12 months. Usually the time that it takes to go through the courts, you get evicted in 12 months. And your fee or the cost of that isn't too much. It's not overbearing. Whereas now what happens if you fall back on your mortgage is, you know, you lose your house, it's repossessed, and most times it's sold way below the value of what you actually think your house is worth, which means, let's say if you've paid your mortgage for 5 years, 10 years, you lose a lot of that value. In fact, you lose all of it because the money goes to the bank. They're trying to recover their money, and you end up have dumped all that fund into a financial pit, a cesspit, essentially speaking. However, you know, if you had the same sort of financial situations with rent, you wouldn't lose out that much, because there isn't much to lose out on. You'd probably only have to, essentially speaking, you can cough up maybe a year's worth of rent, you know, and then you don't end up losing a property that you've put your heart and soul into. And lastly, I think the final thing I'm going to touch upon is there's the general connotation, which I slightly agree with, that when you buy your house, you own it, it's a cesspit. Like, you just pump so much money into it. You want to decorate this, you want to fix this, you want to pave the outside of the property, you want to landscape the garden and all these things. Whereas now, if we were actually renting a property, you know, you're quite comfortable with, you know, how it comes, and you make it homely as much as you can, but in no way do you spend anywhere near the amount of money that you would spend if you were actually buying a property in terms of the decoration, because you start to put your heart and soul into this, and you actually start to see this as one of you, a part of you. Whereas when it's a rented property, it's literally just a rented property, no strings attached. So that's that, in my opinion. Anyways, I've already given my opinion. You know, I think, you know, I would probably end up being the type to maybe rent the property rather than buy the property. But I might change that opinion in future. Who knows? I might come into a lot of millions, 20 million, and now buying that £2 million property might not be such a stretch. And I might just say, you know what, I'm better off just putting down a 50% deposit and buying it rather than paying £8,000 a month, which might seem affordable, but at the end of the day, I'm not benefiting in the equity and everything else that I mentioned in this video. Thank you for watching. If you like these kinds of content, make sure you let me know in the comment section. And until next time, like, comment, and subscribe.